Okay, Baruch Hashem. First and foremost, I really missed everybody, genuinely speaking. I haven't been here, I think, in a couple of weeks. So it's very, very nice to be back. Last week, I really hope you guys enjoyed last week's speaker, whoever came. I got positive feedback. And we're going to try to get Rabbi Edry to come more often, God willing, as well. So you guys really enjoy him because, the goal is to get a speaker that's going to make a difference, who's really going to motivate you. That's the goal here. Anytime you're learning Torah, and there's some relevance actually to this topic today that I'm actually going to talk about. Anyway, so there's a very famous pasuk the Torah discusses in this week's parasha, Parashat Vayikel. The Torah tells us something about the leaders, the tribal leaders, the Nesi'im. And the pasuk begins as follows. It says, "V'hanesi'im eviu et avnei hashoham ve'et avnei hamiluim la'efod ve'lahoshem." So, just a slight introduction here, just to begin. Essentially, the Torah is repeating itself in relation to the Mishkan. Vaikal Pekudeh is a repetition of Terumah and Tetzaveh. There are some insights, some nuances, some slight differences. Nevertheless, it's telling us, it's repeating to us what was mentioned before. Now, in the contribution to the Mishkan again was the tabernacle. What was the tabernacle? It was like a portable, call it a portable, Bet Mikdash, a portable synagogue, something they would go with, in the desert. And they would assemble it and disassemble it in the desert. And so the people, for the Jewish people to build the Mishkan, everybody had to contribute. They all had to give something. So I think we discussed this a couple weeks back. Some people gave very expensive fabric, some gave gold, some gave copper, all different types of metals, things where they're able to contribute and give to the Mishkan itself. Now the Nesi'im, who were essentially the tribal leaders, they were the ones that were put atop on each tribe, and by them, the Torah tells us something very interesting. It says they actually brought expensive stones and gems. Right? We discussed, remember, Avnei Miluim, those stone fillers that we said a couple weeks back, right? That were actually intended to be part of the Hoshen, which was the Kohen Gadol's breastplate. You put these stones inside. They're Avnei Miluim. They brought that. They brought additional stones. That's what the Nesi'im brought. Someone who maybe likes grammar or has an eye for misspelling will see in the pasuk something is off. Why? Because in the Torah, as I said before, we calculate each letter. Each letter has a purpose, right? And if there's a letter missing, it's also a purpose. Here, the way the Torah describes the word Nesi'im, it's missing two yuds. It's spelled V'hanesi'im, Vav Hei Nun Sin Aleph Mem Sofit. Hanesi'im, after the Sin should have been a yud, and after the Aleph should have been a yud. It's gone, evaporated. It's not there. So now again, these are the tribal leaders. Why did the Torah go and remove these two letters from their name, essentially? So Rashi picks up on that. And he tells us. And what the Torah says, Torah is not politically correct. Even if you were righteous, even if you were in a good position, if you did something wrong, the Torah will tell you about it. The commentary, the rabbis, they didn't hold back. So I want to tell you what Rashi says. Rashi says the following. He says that I'm going to read you the Rashi and then I'm going to explain it. The most important parts I'll reinforce. Amar Rabbi Natan, Maru הנשיאים להתנדב בחנוכת המזבח בתחילה ובמלאכת המשכן לא התנדבו בתחילה. חנוכת המזבח is a little later on. The tribal leaders were the first ones in Chanukat HaMizbeach, which was the altar, the inauguration of the altar. They were the first ones to contribute. But by the Mishkans, they were the last ones. So what happened? What changed? How come they were, by the Mizbeach, they were the first ones, and how come here they were the last ones? And by the way, the Mishkan came first, and then after came the Mizbeach. So Rashi says, Elakach amru Nesi'im. The Nesi'im said to themselves the following. They said, Yitnadevu tzibur ma shemitnadevin, u'ma shemachserim, anu mashlemim oto. Which means whatever the Bnei Israel, whatever they give, let them give. And we'll deficit fund. The definition of deficit fund is as follows. If Bnei Israel bring 10%, we'll bring the 90%. That's a big deal. That means you're literally relying and depending on people's level of generosity, people's level of donation, contribution. What's their mood in the moment? You don't know. As far as I'm concerned, being a deficit fund is every fundraiser's dream. So if you want to raise money and someone tells you, listen, raise whatever you can. What's your goal? Your goal is 3 million. If you raise 200,000, the rest is on me. Who would not want that? That's a good thing. So what's the problem? Let me tell you what Rashi says. It's really astounding. It says Rashi the following. כיוון שהשלימו ציבור את הכל, שנאמר והמלאכה הייתה דיים, אמרו נשואים מה לנו לעשות? Surprise, there was nothing left to bring for the Nesi'im. Which means the Jewish people brought everything that was necessary for the Mishkan. The Jewish people could not bring anything, and the Nesi'im could not have nothing left to bring. What should we do? So says Rashi, Heviu Avnei HaShoam. What were the Avnei HaShoam? Where did the Avanim come from? The Avanim came, the Gemara explains in Yumad, the Avanim came, these precious stones, when man, the food that came down from Shamayim during the desert, right? It was a form of bread. When it came down, that's how they were being nourished at the time. When it came down, it also came down with precious stones. So Hashem didn't just take care of them in terms of food, He also provided for them some precious stones. So they came down with those stones. So the Nesi'im, they had nothing left to bring. They said, okay, let's bring the stones. Let's at least have something that we have some sort of human interaction, because we couldn't bring anything. Everybody brought whatever they needed to bring, and that's it. There's nothing left for us to bring. So then Rashi says, lekach hitnadevu bechanukat hamizbeach techila, and that's why they learned their lesson. The Nesi'im said, wait a second. Last time we said we'll deficit fund, which means now we're not deficit funding anything. We're the first ones who are going to bring. And Rashi says, לפי שנתעצלו מתחילה נחסרה אות משמם והנשיאים כתיב, and that's why it's missing. Because the Nesi'im were lazy, Rashi says, they were lazy. And these were tribal leaders. To be a tribal leader, I mean, you have to be a person who not only you have to be a tremendous scholar, but your character traits would have to reflect that as well. You'd have to be a very unique person. But Rashi says no. You know why the 2 letters were missing? Because they were lazy. This is where I want to get into the next portion. It took the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, 2 days to complete their contributions to the Mishkan. 2 days in total. That was very quick. Now, if someone says, I'm going to deficit fund, I promise you it's a dream come true for every fundraiser. It's a dream come true. Could you imagine if now 90% of the responsibility falls on you? That means you're going to get it done, especially if you're a leader. But why are they called lazy? Because at the end of the day, they're leaders. They're in this position, but they're still called lazy, even if they're willing to commit to everything if someone's not doing it. It's almost as if, like you're, in a way, like a guarantor. Someone doesn't add up, someone doesn't, I got it. I'm doing it. That's great. But why are they called lazy? That seems to be inconsistent with being a deficit funder. So that's first thing we're trying to understand. The second thing we're trying to understand, even if you say, okay, they weren't diligent, they didn't have the trait of alacrity, they weren't the first ones going in, fine, but why were they so deeply criticized? Why are we going to remove letters from their names? It doesn't seem like that the punishment fits the crime here. It's very severe to say, it's like bolded, it's highlighted, their names are missing. You're taking letters from their name. Anytime that happens across the whole Torah, whenever there is a missing letter, it's usually what it means is it's some sort of a demerit or some sort of a negative connotation. Anytime there's a missing letter, generally speaking, it doesn't seem like this really makes sense to really punish them in that regard. And lastly, what's the definition of laziness? How are we to actually understand what laziness is? We're saying they're lazy. But it doesn't really make sense that they're lazy. They're doing the deficit fund. So what is the Torah's perspective on laziness? So To quickly summarize, we're trying to understand the idea of why were they being criticized so much if they're willing to deficit fund? Why are they being called lazy? And why is the Torah's definition, what is the exact Torah's definition of laziness? Also, there's a reason why the Yuds specifically were taken away from their name, because we could have achieved that with the letter Aleph. If you take out the letter Aleph, you could still say Nesi'im, it still sounds the same. Why specifically Yuds, the two Yuds? So, the way the Torah, the way we typically define laziness, I think, is if I need to do something, and I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing it. I feel like relaxing. I feel like I have certain responsibilities, obligations, even personal ones. Maybe even if you're used to going to the gym, and you know Mondays and Thursdays you go to the gym. Yeah, I don't feel like going on Thursday. Maybe that's typically how the next day, we should have went to the gym, we were lazy. That's typically how we understand it, for the most part. I want to tell you what's the Torah's definition of laziness, because that's not Torah's definition of laziness. The assumption here is that the Torah's definition of laziness is like this, it's needing something external for motivation. The way we understand laziness, from the Torah's perspective, is I need something outside of myself to motivate me. Let me give you a couple examples. What's today? Wednesday? I'm going to start my diet on a Sunday. How many of us maybe said it? We have to start from the beginning of the week. We can't start right here, right? We need something outside. Everything needs to align perfectly for us to start something, or to do something. Oh, I need to wait. I need to buy this specific machine, or I need to get this amount of money first to commit to something. Or even some of you maybe graduated college or are still in college. We have a paper, or I'm guilty of this, by the way, a paper or a test during college, and we wait for the last minute. Why do we wait for the last minute? Because we don't want to fail, or we don't want to get a bad grade. We don't want to ruin our GPA, so we pull up an all-nighter, or maybe 2 nights in a row. I'm guilty of that too. Whatever it is, right? So we wait, we leave it for the last minute. Because the fear of getting a bad grade, the fear of failing is what motivates us. That's lazy. That's the definition of laziness. That there's something outside of myself that needs to push me, or to a certain extent, impose the consequences upon me for me to be motivated to do something. The Shlomo HaMelech in Mishle writes, he says the following: Lech el nemala atzel re'eh darcheha v'chacham. Shlomo HaMelech, who is known to be the smartest of all human beings, he wrote 3 things. He wrote Kohelet, which is Ecclesiastes. He wrote Shir HaShirim. He wrote Mishle. Shir HaShirim is the Song of Songs. Mishle are the Proverbs. And this is the Proverbs, which is a lot of the mashalim, right? Which are analogies that he's writing. It's an unbelievable book. Highly recommend to learn it. And he writes, if you want to overcome your trait of laziness, go see an ant. An ant. Now, why an ant? It's a fascinating animal. It's probably the hardest working animal that we have. But the lifespan of an ant is like maybe 6 months, not even. They work really, really hard. I once saw I like stuff like this. I want to go deep into them. I once saw a documentary on how hard these ants work. It doesn't make sense. And they don't even enjoy almost what they work for. And they put themselves at risk. It's a very hard working animal. They don't need any motivation. They work collectively as a group, right? They do something as a one unit, right? And so the Shlomo HaMelech tells us, if you wanna overcome your laziness, go see an ant. Go see how hard it works and how they work collectively as a group. But there's an unbelievable Gemara. There's Gemara in Brachot, a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Zera, Agra defirka reihata, which means the following. It's Aramaic, I'm going to explain. The reward for coming to a Shiur Torah is running. What does that mean, that the word for coming for Shiur Torah is running? What does that mean? So if I come to Shiur Torah and I listen and I get Torah and I consume Torah, I don't get reward? I only get reward for getting in my car, for driving, and then sitting down. So I want to tell you what Rashi writes. This is an unbelievable Rashi. Rashi writes, commentating in the Gemara, he says the following: עיקר קיבול שכר הבריות הרצים לשמוע דרשה מפי חכם היא שכר המרוצה שהרי רובם אינם מבינים להעמיד גרסה ולומר שמועה מפי רבן לאחר זמן שקיבלו שכר לימוד. Which means, you know what people get reward for? For the fact that they got dressed, they put on their clothing, they got ready and they went to Shul Torah. They ran to it, they drove to it, they made some sort of physical human effort to get to the Shul Torah. But for listening, you get a little bit, but the main reward is for what? Is for making an effort to be here. That's the main reward, not for listening. Why? We know Talmud Torah keneged kulam. If you learn Torah, it's the greatest of all it's the most reward you get for learning Torah. Hashem gave us eyes, Hashem gave us ears, He gave us, I'm not diluting listening to Shiur Torah, chas v'shalom, but He gave us eyes and He gave us ears. And what Rashi says is most people that go to listen to a Shiur Torah, he says, can you actually give over the Shiur you just learned to somebody else? Can you actually say it over? Can you do it? Most people cannot. Why? Because you have to invest time and effort. You have to listen again. You have to ponder the points. You have to see. You really have to give it a real effort so you can give it over. Because you have to acquire it. We're under the impression, that, I learned something inspirational. That's great. But at the end of the day, if we're fair and honest, repetition is a lot more valuable than inspiration. Having a system in place is a lot more valuable, and then being consistent is a lot more valuable than getting injections of inspiration, because that fades. So repetition, there's a lot more growth in repetition than there is in just bursts of inspiration. A lot more. And so what Rashi is telling us here, you know what the reward is? You came, you have ears, you have a brain, you have mental capacity, you can understand. That's great. But the greatest thing is the amount of effort that you put in. That's what you're going to get reward for. You're not going to get reward for something that was gifted to you. You're intelligent. You're smart. Some people are extremely brilliant. My rabbi specifically, he cannot stand how reward systems work in schools. Even religious schools, you have all these types of rewards: first place, second place, third place. He says it's not right. Academically speaking, you have one student who was born, with an IQ of maybe 140, and then another student born with an IQ of 100. 140 is not going to put the same effort, generally speaking, as 100. Why should they be rewarded? Why should they be rewarded equally or differently? They should be rewarded according to the effort. Because at the end of the day, long-term success oftentimes will be measured not by how intelligent we are, not by how much connections we can have, but by the effort we put. And oftentimes, what do people respect? People, generally speaking, in a conversation, even athletes, right, or successful people, a lot of the respect that we give over to them comes from the effort that they put. And if they're effort and if they're extremely intelligent and they have effort, and you combine them together, so that's someone very unique. But most of the respect comes from how much a person makes something outside of himself, other than what he has been gifted from Hashem. You've been gifted something great. What are you going to do with it? You can't get reward for that because it's not yours. It's a gift. And so, at the end of the day, the Nesi'im were the ones that, they had a good idea, they had a good intention. But by them, what effort did they do? Essentially, the clouds came down, had stones, they went, they picked up the stones, they gave it, that's it. There's actually, in Hebrew, this is unbelievable, because in Hebrew, there's another word for clouds. It sounds similar to Nesi'im. And there's actually a drasha in the Yerushalmi which says something similar, that the word Nesi'im, although it means the tribal leaders, another way to read it is the clouds, which means not that the Nesi'im gave those stones, it was actually the clouds. It was actually the clouds that gave it. It wasn't the Nesi'im themselves, because there was no real human effort involved in them actually taking it and contributing something. Which leads me to another very important thing. There's a very, very unique book called Mesilat Yesharim. And there, I read an unbelievable commentary on this book about how people can actually go on about feeling aspects of their change. Where we know, and this is the first thing he discusses in his book, he says, I'm paraphrasing him into English, whatever we know to be absolute truth, it's a truth that's self-evident. We know. The very thing that is very clear to us, the very things that we have no doubt and we know to be 100% true, and these are clear things in our minds, are the very things we tend to forget about the most. I'll say that again, the very things that are very clear to us, that are the ones that we have no doubt, like the existence of God. We know God exists, we know He's part of the world, everybody has a relationship with Him, but when we behave in a way that we're not very proud of, well, all of a sudden we forget God exists. We know it exists, but in the moment, yes. Either we put it behind us, like He doesn't exist, and that happens to, by the way, not just secular people, ultra-religious people as well, everybody, because they have Yetzer Hara also, they have evil inclinations, they have their struggles. Sometimes people put them on a very high pedestal because they represent Torah, and I understand that, but everybody needs to understand, they have their struggles as well. They're human beings. They're formed from the same flesh as everybody else. They have the same drives and indulgences. They aspire to something higher, fine. So they should be judged that way. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they're also human beings, and they have their moments as well, and they have their moments where they can forget God's presence is right there in front of them. Everybody does. At the end of the day, the very thing that is very self-evident that we know are the very things that we tend to forget about. And therefore it requires a lot of repetition, a lot of knowledge. Why? Let's say someone struggles with the trait of anger, hypothetically. You have a problem, you can't control yourself, you have a bad temper. Certain things trigger you. How are you going to overcome that? The Torah gives you advice. It tells you exactly how to do it. Let's say you know this is the formula. Now just because you have knowledge of the formula, who says it's going to work? For it to work, what do you have to do? You have to put in effort. You have to practice it. It has to become one with you. So right now when someone does something to get under your skin, right now when someone where you feel your blood boiling and you want to emotionally react, now you have to use whatever you acquired mentally, and now you have to put out the fire that you have burning inside you with the intellectual knowledge you've acquired over time. How are you going to do that? You have to repeat what you learn. You don't have a choice. The more you repeat what you learn, the more you review it, the more it becomes one with you. And if it becomes one with you, then you can slowly work on those traits that are holding you back. And therefore, repetition is what is really the reward. It's the profit that we have in our pocket. Not just, yeah, it's good. The reward is there's an effort. That's good. Nobody takes it away. But it's not enough. It's not enough because that injection of inspiration won't last. That's just the reality of it. You can see all these reels on social media that gives a lot of inspiration, bursts of inspiration, and then a lot of us they just flick up, flick up, flick up. You're not left with anything. Therefore, it's only repetition that's going to make a difference. And repetition requires a person to overcome laziness. And therefore, this is what the Torah is coming to tell us about the Nesi'im. Previous generations, at least I could say my father's generation, and I'm sure the ones before, were extremely hardworking people. Extremely hardworking people. And, I'm not casting aspersions on generations. There's millennials, there's all these types of different generations where maybe we feel a little bit more entitled. Maybe we don't feel like we have to work. I'm not saying we should work extremely hard. We definitely should work intelligently, and because there's ways today to work intelligently and not to sacrifice your whole day. And we're in a way blessed to be in this society that we live in. Can you imagine 100 years ago how they have to wash clothes? It was like, I think it was a half a day ordeal. Today, within an hour and a half, either you can wash it yourself or someone's going to do it for you. We have all these things that really, we have so much time in our hands, And back then, they lacked the time that we have today, and we still say, we don't have time. And I'm not saying we have a lot of time. Weeks are stressful, days are stressful, but who are we kidding? And like, if people are honest, if we're very honest with ourselves, how we utilize our time, that's something that it may be a difficult conversation to have with ourselves, but everybody understands that having this leisure time that we have is very, very difficult. I have one of the boys that I learned with, he said, the minute he got off social media, right, he said his whole life changed completely. He says he hired somebody to work on a few of his business, and that's it. He's totally detached from it, completely. There's benefit to social media. I'm not saying there isn't, and it's very rewarding to a certain extent. After a long day, you can sit back and relax. I can understand that, but it's not one of those things that you genuinely feel like, I feel good after doing it. There's certain activities that you do and you feel accomplished. There's certain things that you put your effort in. I feel like I've done something meaningful today. I think most people who spend hours on social media feel a sense of emptiness, that I haven't done anything productive with myself. And so when it comes to the Nesi'im, the Torah wasn't politically correct. The Torah was telling us we took away the letters from them. Why? Because even though they gave stones, it wasn't really them. It wasn't them. It wasn't their effort. They don't essentially deserve to have their full name spelled out in that fashion, in that format. Only for these reasons. Because it wasn't them. And if it's not you, then why should you give reward for something? We have another, the Torah tells us, Nefum tzara agra. According to the effort will be your reward. Where how much effort you put forth, that's going to be a reward. But we have to let go of the concept, I need something to be motivated. We don't need anything. We need just to make a decision to commit to it. A person needs to take responsibility to commit to something and just go with it. Because at the end of the day, my personal struggle is I'm a perfectionist. A perfectionist is, and something that I've worked on over the years, it's very difficult, is every little detail is important. And when every little detail is important, you drain yourself and your energies, and you don't have energy for other stuff as well. That's also a problem. Being a perfectionist can also have within it hidden laziness. Laziness is a thing that can come in different forms, shapes, and sizes. I don't know. I don't have time. I need to have other tools. You know, there's a sefer called Chovat Halevavot, and the author of it, right, is an unbelievable author. What he wrote, Rabbeinu Bachya, he's an extraordinary scholar, and he went around trying to find somebody to write a book that he went to big rabbis' generation and said, I want you to write this book about how to properly trust God, and do it intellectually, not emotionally. Give a system in place. So I'll give you an example. In the book, in the very beginning, he gives a list of why intellectually it's in your best interest to trust God. And I'll give you just one example. He says, if someone has a machine that prints money, let's assume that's the only problem is money in their life. Now you have a machine that prints money. What's the problem, he says, with that? He says, number one, you're dependent on paper. Number two is you need ink. What happens if there's a shortage of ink or paper in the market? What are you going to do? Number three, you're worried maybe they're going to catch you, the authorities. Number four, maybe your neighbor's going to find out and they're going to threaten you. He gives a whole list of things that he shows you, at the end of the day, you're dependent on any and everything possible in the world. And at the end of the day, if you got to depend on something, as human beings, we have to depend on something. As human beings, we have to have a degree of fear. We have certain emotions within us that we have to unload them, or we have to put them somewhere. And if we don't put them, and we have a choice. We can put them in people, or we can put them in Hashem. We have where do I want to put that? Because at the end of the day, there's certain emotions we have to express outwardly. We can't just keep them bottled up. So I have a choice. Do I trust? I can trust. I can have a good messenger. I can have a successful doctor where I say, okay, God sent me a good messenger, and I trust God that He sent me the right person to get the job done accordingly. Great. But if I put all my chips on this person, we say it every morning in Tehillim, we say it every Pesukah de Zimra, right? That we shouldn't trust the generosity of people's hearts. Because at the end of the day, one day they cannot, do not trust those that are generous hearts, because you don't know. You don't know. Today they have, tomorrow they don't. So as human beings, we have a need to trust. The Gemara, it says in Ta'anit that the children look to the mother to provide them with food. And the mother looks to the husband to provide them food. And who does the husband look up to? To Hashem. Because everybody has a nature in which they have to do it. The beautiful thing though, is when you look up to Hashem to help you in whatever it is you want to achieve, He gives you the feeling that you're actually doing it yourself. That's what's amazing. It's almost as if you understand that everything is from Hashem, but the most unbelievable thing is Hashem gives us the feeling that I succeeded. It's almost as if you know it's from Him, but you feel 100% that almost I did it. It could be an unbelievable story, but you still have a sense of, yeah.
Doesn't that make it harder for us to believe? Like, if He makes us feel like we did it, like I did it, then it's harder to believe that it comes from Him. No, if he gives us that feeling.
So you're very interesting. You're saying. So I'll answer with this. There was during the history we had a few kings, Jewish kings. One of them was Hizkiah, which was a very righteous king, and during his time, right, if he went to battle, what did Hashem do? His soldiers didn't have to go out to battle. Hashem brought an actual epidemic disease on the enemies and killed everybody. David went to battle, and David was a fearless warrior. He went to battle, and for him it was very different results. It wasn't like that. Why was David greater than Melech Hizkiah? Was that even though he really prevailed in wars and he came out victorious, right? Which is a feeling of I did it. David HaMelech knew it was all God. That is the highest level. To understand that I get the feeling that maybe I do it, it's all me, but I really know, I understand, I'm just a pawn here. I put my effort forth. I make something that is required of me to do. And once I make my effort forth, then, because at the end of the day, effort begets credit. Right? I put my effort, I want some credit, I want recognition. These things make sense. Conclusively, at the end of the day, it just comes down to where do we attribute that credit to? We can give it to ourselves, say, no, it's really from Shamayim. And therefore, when the Avanim came down, they came down from Shamayim. So when the word, it says Hanesi'im, what the Pasuk is telling you is not that it was the tribal leaders. It was really the clouds who gave the contributions, because all they did is just pick up the stones and just give it to the tabernacle. That's it. Why? They shouldn't get credit. Therefore, they were at that time they were called laziness, but they learned from their mistakes, and that's why they're the first ones to give it. Because we said, why are we taking away from their name? We weren't taking away from their name. It's not even them. It's the clouds, and we're trying to understand what's the definition of laziness. They needed an external reason. What's the external reason? Deficit fund. Oh, there isn't enough? Okay, we'll take care of the rest. No. The definition of laziness is I don't need something outside of myself to do something. I don't need that. And if I realize that things in my life motivate me to do stuff because of external reasons, then we have to understand that's laziness. And we have to find something that's a lot more meaningful for us to actually go and do it than something outside. There is a place to be motivated. There is a place for incentivizing and reward. I'm not saying there's no place for it, but that's something to maybe in the beginning to hook us on, right? To get us going. That's fine. That's why we have a very famous dictum: mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. That's why when you bring a kid to a synagogue, you give him a candy. So why does he come to the synagogue? Because of the candy. And then he gets a little bit older, right? Maybe you give him, and you want him to motivate him, you give him a little bit of money. Right? And what do you give an adult? You guys know what you give an adult? My mind, he says?
Coffee.
Huh? Alcohol? What else? What do you guys say? What do you give an adult? How do you motivate an adult?
Money.
No? That's the exact word too. A very simple thing, kavod. If you give honor to a person, that's candy to a kid. Honor to a person is like candy to a kid. You give them honor, they're gonna get it. They're gonna come. They'll be here. All you gotta do is honor. Be mechabed them, you're good. Give them a sense of recognition. That's all you have to do. So there is a place to motivate, but it cannot be the reason why you're doing things on a regular basis. You cannot be motivated just by even a person who steals, hypothetically. A thief, right? What's the problem with thieves? Is that they don't understand what it means to go and work hard and to make money. They go, they use it, and that's it. And they're always on the run on taking and stealing. A person who makes money, why does he value his money so much? Because if he produced it on its own, there's effort involved. Your time is in that money. There's a book called Michtav Meliyahu. It's an unbelievable sefer. He says, if right now, if you went to a person's house, you took a tomato, and you took that tomato and you threw it on the wall, smashed the tomato. He's like, what are you doing? Tomato, badashkit, why are you doing that? Then you have another guy, go to his house, in his backyard, he's working for 1 full year on growing tomatoes. He's watering them, he's putting the seed, he's harvesting, he's really taking care of his tomatoes. There's that one beautiful red tomato that grows, you take that tomato and you throw it on the ground and you step on it. Are they gonna feel the same? Why? Why not? One put himself inside that tomato. So what you're doing is it's not the tomato, it's the time that you took from the person. You literally took the time from the person and you it's almost as if you erased all the effort that they put forth into something. That is a very frustrating feeling, but it's just a tomato. What's the difference? It's not a tomato. Because at the end of the day, we are measured and valued by how much effort we produce. Because results we're not in control of. It's a very difficult concept everybody knows this, but it's difficult to internalize and accept. We're not in control of results, we're not. And the more a person internalizes and realizes I'm not in control of the result, then the more they can live life accordingly, where they can put in effort and just let go. You know, and I see this so many times. There's a lot of people who I know are extremely intelligent people who, when I was younger, like, wow, they're probably going to be extremely successful. And then people were just regular people, you didn't think, became very successful. And you see, ones were just doers, just active doers. They just do and do and do and do. And now you understand why they got to where they got to. And then you have the people who kind of stay the same because they don't have that mentality of going and doing. Maybe they overthink, or maybe they don't have the confidence, or they overcalculate. Whatever the reason may be, it's not their effort because maybe they're perfectionists. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. But I know one rabbi, he's very special, very, very special. He literally started a whole new community from nothing. No money. He bought a place up. Now he has 2 schools running. I mean, I tell him, how did you get to where you got to? He tells me, I'm like, can you like, how did you think of this? He's like, the problem is I don't think, I just do. He just tells me, I just do, I don't think. And there's obviously value in thinking and being forward thinking, but there's a ton of value in just doing and jumping into the water. That's when things happen. That's when you'll be able to feel like you're actually doing something. It doesn't have to be perfect. And there's a saying, right? Profit is the enemy of perfection. You guys have heard that saying before? Profit is, if you want to go out to the market, if you want your product or service to be perfect, forget about it. You're not going to make a dime. You're not. But if you at least you're most of the way you're there, and you're willing to get into the market and be one of the first, you'll be one of the first ones. But yeah, you have something good, okay, you'll perfect it as you go along. You'll make it better. Because even in your mind, this is the problem that we did, even in our mind, okay, this is the perfect thing. How do you know it's perfect? You don't have the tools to measure what's perfect. You need feedback. Feedback is what's going to tell you what adjustments to make. I'll tell you a cool story. You guys, a business story, just so you guys really see where I'm going with this. Everybody knows Febreze, right? Febreze has a very cool case. Febreze was actually a big failure when they first came to the market, right? Now, they marketed as, this is something that takes away noxious odors, and this is how they marketed Febreze to begin with. Didn't sell, didn't work. That great technology, just it wasn't selling. So they said, let us put cameras in a few homes, and they said, here's the Febreze, use it as you see fit. So they had people cleaning their homes. And a lot of them were women actually going and cleaning their homes. And then they realized after they cleaned the whole house, they used Febreze afterwards. And then it hit them. And then they say, wait a second, how is it effective? What do we do wrong here? They realized Febreze was going to come as a reward after cleaning. Not that it's intended there to go and take away bad smell, but it's reward after cleaning. So I know a lot of times if someone cleans a room or house, there's a sense of good feeling. So you want to reward that good feeling. So then they put out commercials that after everything is clean, you're going to spray. That's the whole idea. So they won in the market. They failed massively, and then they're able to make an adjustment based on doing what they did. So we never really fully know, but there's nothing greater than jumping into the water. And by the way, when you jump, you're with Hashem. You in a way you're so vulnerable, and this is why the beautiful of jumping and trying new things. You're so vulnerable. You're with Hashem. So Hashem starts. Oh, you trust me? Okay, I'm gonna take you for a nice ride. And many unbelievable things can happen, but you have to take a chance. You have to put in the effort. Jumping is the first part of the effort. You're not done. But this is why it's so beautiful. Anything that's to your name, anything that you wouldn't get credit for, can only come through your own effort. In Shamayim, after 120 years, nobody's going to get credit for something that was gifted. And anybody here maybe who comes from a very wealthy family, hypothetically. I'm sure if people come from wealthy families, they want to be able to make something of their own. At least that's how I think. I mean, logically, I would think. I mean, if you come from someone really, really wealthy, you think you want to make something of your own. Not go and I know a few people like that. They come from very wealthy families and they made something of their own because they don't want that. They don't want that credit. They want to go make. That's as I think also very much as men generally speaking want to feel like they're producing something of their own, and that's not just true in business side. Even in Torah, in the world of Torah itself, you want to be able to produce things of your own. Also, you want to be able to come with new insights. You want to feel like you're doing something that is your effort, that you have made something out of it, because that's what we thrive on. But it can only come. We cannot fall a prey. It's much more than laziness. The term is laziness, but the real understanding is that cannot be limited to being motivated to external things. It's not going to work because I'm behind. I gotta figure out something that motivates me for myself to do it by myself. Therefore, that's my own effort. And once I do that, then I'm able to produce and make something that's related to me, that comes from me, wasn't just gifted to me. And that's why the Nisim were missing the letters, because it doesn't really, even though they wanted a deficit fund, which is great, they needed that deficit to fund it. And that deficit was the external motivation. That is the definition of laziness. And that's not something we can rely on. And this is why the Torah took away those letters, because it wasn't even them, it was the clouds. And that's why the words Nesi'im and clouds mean the same exact thing. Any questions? Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.